All right, welcome to this week's episode of SCP Meta, aka Confic Call-In. This is your host, Lack of Lepers, aka SCP CRNP, and this is our weekly broadcast. We cover everything to do with the space involved with the SCP Wiki. We call that containment fiction, so SCP Meta Confic. We are a live show. You can join us via our Discord in the Society for Containment Fiction channel. You also have the option to dial our phone number. We do have an exclusive phone number for when we are live, which is every Saturday from 11 Central till about 12 or so. And you can call that number 316-444-3115. Again, that is 316-444-3115. And I'm going to put that up on the screen just here for those who are watching. All right, so on that note, we do have something very exciting. I've been waiting for this for quite a while to kick us off, and that is going to be a voicemail that somebody left on our wonderful Skype. So thank you very, very much. This is going to be Dr. Fern. Before we go any further, I'd like to thank the individuals who are joining us. We got Almer Duck in the house. Of course, Dr. Fern is chilling, and the one and only James Bond. Thank you all very much for being here.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get to this voicemail. Dr. Fern has been so kind as to leave us one. So let us take a peek at this. This is about a minute or two, and so we'll listen to this story. Y'all let me know if you can't hear this, but it should come through just fine.
Fern wanted to leave a message for the show and actually just tell a little story about an... Hey, this is actually Dr. Fern wanted to leave a message for the show and actually just tell a little story about an experience with the liminal eye, actually in real life experience. A couple years ago, my sister-in-law was in the hospital for premature labor for her first children.
Oh, wow.
A set of twins.
Wow.
And we were there all night. Now, her birth room was on the second floor, and that's what the waiting room was. And on the fifth floor of the hospital was the free coffee and snack area we can go to. So throughout the night, I would take trips up to the second and fifth floor to get free coffee to keep me awake for this all-nighter while we, anxiously await to see what happens at birth. Now, during one of these trips, probably about 3 at night, I remember getting into the coffee room, getting a cup of coffee, exiting the room, and then noticing that everything was different. The hall seemed to just go longer than what they should have. There was nobody, not even a nurse or a janitor in the hallway. It was just me walking, and I went the way that I remember was the right way, and it was just more hallways. I turned a corner, it's more hallways. I kept going in loops, what felt like hours, until finally I managed to find the elevator back down to the waiting room. And mixed in with the emotion of the entire night, that entire circumstance still stuck with me. Fast forward to today, and I find out there's a whole entire community of people writing fictional articles about stuff like this. Something that actually in real life happened to me was shocking, to say the least. That's my story. I hope you can use the show. Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Fern. Have a wonderful day.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much, Dr. Fern, for leaving that. Yeah, great story. Hospitals are just such liminal spaces. They're just so rife with creepiness. I still work at a hospital, but I used to work at a unit on the night shift, and I would swear sitting there at night, just trying my hardest to stay awake, looking down the very long hallway of repetitive rooms, I could have sworn that it elongated in front of my vision. But well, I hope the birth went well, and certainly the disorienting situation, I'm sure, didn't help that. But that's limfic fuel for you.
Congratulations.
Yeah, a lot of good births happening.
One thing, the stream, it's cutting off and on. I'm not sure why.
Is this
sometimes it displays nicely, and sometimes it cuts on and off.
Okay. I'll go back and look at that. It could be that I'm trying too much at once. I got a couple things, but I can simplify that. Is it the audio or is it just the video?
No, just the video.
Okay. Well, we'll see what we can do. We try to make this audio friendly as it is, because it does show up in podcast form. So I'll take a look at that. I'll look at the replay. Probably be more than I can chew right now to try to fix in real time. But thanks for letting me know. All right, so just to start things off with, we'll go through our local news. So the magazine article this week is a nice J article. This is SCP-6978J, a generic SCP. This is written by wiki.user OrionGS, and it's just a very brief read, probably 2 minutes. Nothing too fancy, but I felt like it was really nice. This showed up on the SCP Wiki, and it was downvoted pretty quickly, pretty swiftly. I thought there was a little more to it than what was being credited to it. So here it is. If you haven't read it, check it out. And that's our magazine article for the week. And so the next thing that we're going to be doing is recommendations. So this week's recommendation, we'll actually have one from the RPC Authority, and we'll have one from the SCP Authority. It was a busy week for me reading. And this week's RPC article of the week is RPC 470, written in part by one of our participants present here, Almerdug. And also,
Thank you.
Yeah, co-written with Prototype Toaster, who, if I understand correctly, did a lot of the media, and which certainly is an impressive part of the article. But yeah, Almerdug, what can you tell us about this?
Well, it's mostly Proto's achievement. The only thing I provided was the mystery plot and kind of the general organization, but the soul of the article is his. All the know-how of the internet and all the images, the context that's necessary to write this kind of article, it's all his part. I also made the conclusion, but it was kind of running off of his fumes, more or less. I don't feel really bad shilling it because I don't feel I had any role in its success.
Yeah, it kind of gives you a little more leeway. You're the shilling arm of the operation, I see. You get the marketing push going. Yeah, so this doesn't need a shill. It doesn't need a marketing push. This is an incredibly well-written article. And for those of you who may know Prototype Toaster just from the days of old, his early days participating in the SCP Wiki, this is just an incredibly talented article. There's no nonsense here. I mean, everything. There's so much detail. There's so much attention to detail. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful example of painting a picture that you're given just the right amount of mystique in, and it really grips you from the beginning, and it doesn't let go. There are very, very few moments in this where it isn't running at just an ineffable pace. It's just amazingly engaging. I particularly enjoyed how there's so much extra detail in the images. A lot of these things are social media sort of captures and forum post captures, and the details that you would obviously potentially miss if you just glossed over those if you didn't read carefully. I want to thank you, that owl dude, for showing up. Thanks for being here today.
Hey, thanks.
And so if you haven't read SCP-470, I do recommend you do it. I think the rating here at 5 stars.
A few minutes ago, it was SCP Authority that you said.
Oh, I did. Sorry, that's one. That's having a stroke live here. Yeah, so no, sorry about that. RPC. It has a perfect 5 rating. Even the aggregate doesn't look like. I don't want to ruin that and jinx it, but this is a very adequate rating for this. So excellent job.
Yeah, I'm very happy to have co-wrote that with him because Proto was always a writer I felt that he had a lot of potential, but never quite lived up to it because he waffles around, he loses attention, doesn't finish his projects, he just never quite got there. And seeing him really put his all into this collab felt really rewarding because I had expecting him to write something very good for a long time. And did it.
Well,
holy shit, it's amazing.
I mean, it's so good. It sounds like you kind of maybe had a coaching role in that, so that's excellent. Sometimes people just need a little boost, and whether it's confidence or whether it's just that little extra kick to get things pushed through. I'm thankful that you did that, and absolutely thankful for Prototype Toaster reading that. Now, on a larger note, that is one of the entries in the broader Horizons contest at RPC, which is finished, and the winners have been announced. First place went to RPC 880 by 8 Ismo, or I think Gizmo is also what you say. Better My Butter, who we know came in second place. And then the piece that I just recommended was tied for third. The other tie being Vizlox. I believe this is a tale. So I'm very excited to read all of this. Haven't gotten to it yet, but if what I read was the third place, damn, we're going to see how things shake out. But I've long felt like second and third place, basically right up there with whoever wins.
Yeah, I really like the winning entries, but they kind of fell short in some ways. Like, there's the potential there with like a little more rewrite, a little more time in the oven. That would have been fucking great. I think you'll see what I mean with them.
Okay. Well, I'm definitely looking forward to reading that this week. Speaking of which, so we'll move on to the SCP recommendations of this week. Now, this week I put myself to the very difficult task of trying to read every article that came through, and I even casted that on the Twitch just to make it a little more engaging, hopefully, but it only lasted 4 days. It was quite exhausting. There wasn't a lot of reward for that, but I did get to read a lot of articles, and I think of the 10 I read, 2 of them I can recommend. Which is commentary on why I'm not doing that anymore, but that's for another time. But this one, SCP-6918, has a very underrated rating, but is a very nice, pretty simplistic article in its layout and what it's actually dealing with, which is a temporal anomaly. But it's just a highly conceptual article, and it does a very, very good job of taking what usually is a very sticky subject. It's very difficult to write, temporal anomalies, and it does this with a really real good knack for making it work, telling you the ending up front, and then through these entries, which are journal entries, makes it very, very engaging to get to that ending that you already know is coming.
God, those collapsibles are intimidating.
Yeah, and another reason I couldn't get through all the articles, it was just, it became clear after 4 days that it was just going to be all-encompassing. I could either do this and nothing else, or just find something else to do. If I committed to this totally, I wouldn't be able to write anything. I wouldn't be able to do anything. But these are all relatively.
It's part of what the statistics that I think we're going to discuss them later.
Yeah, let's actually hit that right now. So I didn't want to pull it up too much, but Almerduk is working, I believe, on an article for the magazine. Correct me if I'm wrong. And one of our members, Salt Blossom, has gotten into some statistical analysis of Wikidot sites. So you got SCP and just a little bit of RPC going on too. Almerduk, would you like to summarize what we've been looking at so far there?
Yeah, we had a few versions of that analysis, and the general trends that we are noticing is that length by series, like by blocks of 1,000, are getting generally very they are kind of like doubling a few times over. They double between series 2 and series 3, and they double again between series 6 and 5 and 7. We had a few versions of this analysis because one of them included offsets, other of them did not. The other one was organized in histograms, and although there's a lot of different ways to interpret what exactly the phenomenon we're looking at is, bottom line is articles the average length of articles is getting way longer. Like the average for series 7, which admittedly it's kind of outliers kind of stretch the average a lot, but the average length of an article in series 7 is more or less the same as a novella chapter.
Oh boy.
Which, keep in mind, novella has like 30 of them at most, and series 7 has 1,000 of them.
Yeah.
Just to give you a sense of magnitude.
I think it's been
This is even with yeah?
Go ahead.
This is even with the trend of short articles that we had a while ago.
Exactly.
Kind of
Exactly.
really short, like less than 1,000. And This is counting the 300 or so empty slots in the series as zeros. So,
Wow.
uh, it's going to get larger.
Yeah,
That number is going to get way longer.
And I think those past statistical analyses of the previous series excluded the really dramatically long ones, like I can't remember that one. What happened to Site 13, 17, 30, I suppose it is, but also ones like SCP 6500. More recent ones that are just so outlying that it's best to ignore them, to truncate them out of the calculation.
No, because the reason 1730 was excluded was because the reason 6500 was excluded was because it used offsets. 1730 does not use offsets, so
Oh, I see.
it could be included.
Okay.
It also doesn't include 093, which is insanely long, but since all of the content is in supplemental files and not attached to the article, I think we had no way of checking their length.
Yeah, so that'll be in an upcoming article. Kind of wanted to tease it here and give the main reveal to the authors for that article, but it's really fascinating, and just want to pat ourselves in the back. I don't think you're getting this sort of analysis and attention to detail anywhere else. So check that out. Keep an eye out for that. That's coming up. And then thank you. And the second article I would recommend is 6877. This is an SCP article with a rating of 26, which is well below what it should be. But this is a really interesting article. The image sort of gives you the gist. It's about a guide mast that extends into the clouds, and an anomalous effect spatio-temporally happens above the clouds there. The logs are not too long, and I think the author has a really good sense of pacing. And if you notice, I don't know if this is the CSS, but it sort of like lightens in the text as it gets closer to the bottom. And if you read the article, it really ties into the ascent up this guide mast into these grayer and more obfuscating clouds. So just some nice touches in this, but ultimately it's about the text, not the gimmicks. And this is a really well written article.
Oh, I'll read that later.
And just on that note, so I'm gonna try to keep up with the SCPs, but I don't think I can read them all. It's kind of like if you've ever heard like Simon Cowell, on the singing competition shows, where you hear like 10 seconds of a song and you basically, or someone singing, and you basically know what the quality is. You don't have to listen to it for another 12 minutes to know that it probably isn't going to be your thing. So we'll keep reading and we'll keep having recommendations. But if y'all would like to recommend things, there's a channel, obviously, that we have here on the Discord, and if I don't have a chance to read, I'll probably just pull from there and may even ask you about a little bit of commentary as to why you recommended it. But keep doing that. It's a great way to filter out some of the good stuff in this space. All right, so moving on a little bit, we'll kind of get into the fandom, the little bit of a larger community here than just our local news, and see what's been going on in the space. This is late last month on the screen here. Hopefully you can see, but this is the Exploring series, who we're all familiar with, who does a very good job, I think. One of the more fidelitous of the YouTube content sort of regurgitators and adapters. Their videos can go for hours to get the gist of the article that they're using. And this particular video is about SCP-6800, an article called The White Ashes. Now, I took a look back at this, and here it is, in case you may have seen it. Of course, my computer has trouble with all this this wizardry going on here. But this was an entry into the 6K contest, and as you can see, it has a table of contents, so it follows in the footsteps of the statistical trend that Almeric was talking about. And you might notice
that scrolling line at the right, it's very small.
Yeah, it is. And gosh, and once again, once you get to a collapsible and you hit that, how many of you look at that scroll bar and just gauge how far up it goes? When you click the collapsible, it's like, oh sheesh.
I like to scroll to the ending, and if there's some kind of formatting or something that catches my eye, I'll read it until that point. If it doesn't, I just quit it.
Yeah, this is really, a larger point. And actually, I was finishing up the Dr. Gears interview with Sean Saxum on YouTube. I don't know if y'all have heard that. That's really, really a great, great interview. It's about 3 hours long. I was finishing it up. And Dr. Gears was actually making this point, which obviously I agree with, which is that it's becoming more and more imperative, particularly with the inundation of content that we see on the SCP, to really stand out. And unfortunately, I think most of that is being done with length, with CSS wizardry. But of course, Dr. Gears was recommending that you do it in your actual writing, so that by the first or second sentence of the containment procedures, you've put your best foot forward. So I'm kind of like you, Almaduck. I mean, if I get to a certain point in the article and I just know it's that 10-second clip of someone singing, and I just know it's a nope, not gonna work. But
I haven't watched the interview you're talking about, but what you're saying gives me the distinct impression that Gears does not look very happy about SCP.
Yeah, I would really, really recommend this. I'm gonna try to pull this up without rest in peace headphone users kind of thing. But yeah, here's his YouTube channel, Sean Saxum. He's done a really wonderful series of interviews, including DJ Cactus, including Randomini, and now Dr. Gears. And he does sort of group interviews with others in the space. For example, his recent one is with Dr. Gears and Dr. Clef. And is sort of the white guard of YouTube, you could say, in this sense. And these interviews are remarkably educational. They're really fantastic listens. Here's the Dr. Gears one. And yes, you're right, Almaduck. He does actually say a lot about the SCP. It's very, very interesting to listen to what he has to say. It maybe surprise you, maybe not. He sort of echoes a lot of the things that we might criticize in this Discord server, actually.
Huh.
But highly recommend that, and I do reaction videos to these on my YouTube, just FYI. I'll put a link in the description of this if you want to watch that with me and listen to me ranting. But back to the SCP-6800, The White Ashes. This is by an author by the name of, I think it's Marcel Rains, who, as far as I understand, fine author. Nothing really against this individual at all. But it seems as though, let me double check this. Yes, Marcellus Rains, here's the name. But it seems as though this didn't go very well. If you actually scroll down to the comments, it's interesting. You see a lot of individuals sort of putting forth a more critical foot than usual. For example, here's just an example one. There are a lot of these. I don't know. This is a good read, but by the logic in the story seems flimsy in several places. The Foundation, even past their initial lack of response, don't seem much like themselves, and this is beyond their simplest ideal of keeping humanity alive. And so it was a little bit of a stir. I didn't really care for this one. One main problem in the story, I was surprised to see this one. Yeah, it really got very, very mixed reviews. And if we actually go back to the article, this one is sitting pretty. It's sitting pretty at about 238. So it's just interesting to see, I think, what is this a sign of? When you take an article that's highly successful on the site, pop it out into the greater fandom, and I don't know, it seems as maybe, though, there's an echo chamber of the definition of quality perhaps being amplified on the actual SCP. But this was something interesting to see. And that typically, we're pining for more sort of creative criticism going on. But if you haven't seen it on YouTube lately, here's a good spot for it.
I've seen a bunch of this criticism outside of the wiki, and that's really, really odd for any kind of fandom, because look over to Backrooms, and you could have an article written by a 12-year-old and YouTube commenters will still praise it. So seeing YouTube commenters start literary criticism is kind of unique, actually. And I think this speaks as to how SCP is becoming more insular. Insular? I don't think that's the correct pronunciation.
Yeah, you got it.
I wouldn't go as far as to call it an echo chamber, but there's definitely a separation between the standards SCP has and standards other people have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of people didn't like this one. They felt like it was a little preachy. It does deal with themes of environmental change, and I think more people had an issue with how that sort of meta message, that sort of preachy kind of message, sort of wedged itself into the more traditional roles of things that are featured in the article, like for example the Fae, and the general ideals and goals of the foundation. So it's for example, this guy, this individual, as much as I enjoy listening to these stories, this one sticks out in my mind as an obvious outlier. No shade to the creator, as they put effort in this, but there's some serious issues with some specific parts. And so, I agree with you, Elmerduk. One of the special things about the SCP Wiki and its community really is how it was raised in terms of its creative prowess. I think it's had high standards for a very, very long time. I'm a little worried about it, once again, having read every SCP article this week that made it to the Wiki. I do remember one article that had just a tremendous amount of simple grammatical errors, spag stuff, just to the extent that it was a little alarming that no one, even in the comments, kind of brought that out as something to mention. And yet this article was probably one of the more higher rated ones that I looked at this week. So,
I noticed that too. That sort of thing to me was always something that I would see in RPC. I love RPC, but we do a very poor job with keeping a grammar standard. So seeing it in SCP, which I really associated with having perfect clinical tone, perfect grammar everywhere, and people making sure that was always the case, is kind of alarming.
Yeah, and at some point, the train is going to go so fast with so much momentum behind it, so many train cars attached, that you're going to lose control of it. And I think that we would be seeing some of this happen. We talk a lot of game about SCP and why we don't like it, and we have hangups with it for sure. But I think a lot of the things that we're seeing happening would happen even in the most ideal sociological setup. So even if there was no, corruption or political scandal or something like a sanctioned double standard going on en masse, I think these would still be problems, because once you get so popular, what really happens is that bell curve of kind of mundane writing just expands faster than the tail ends of that bell curve. So there's way more mediocre article content coming in, and just those standards that the SCP is known for, that it almost seems, if you look at this SCP-6800 YouTube comments, it's sort of being stewarded now by the outer community in some ways. The standards from the SCP Wiki, it's really, really hard for those to scale with size. So as the Wiki is getting more popular, I think, hey, at some point things get too big, they get top heavy, they fall over. That's just life. I don't want to be dramatic about it, but it is a little alarming to see articles that have just, tremendously egregious spag issues be more upvoted than, for example, the ones that I shared with you today as recommendations.
Because keep in mind that this isn't nothing. This is a decade-long standard that has been upkept. And seeing it start to fade away, survived like 10 years of community change, is worrying. It should be worrying, because the community survived containment breach and improved after that, but it's not surviving this second wave of popularity. It's losing its basic standards, which it sounds like fear-mongering. I'm kind of a conspiracist in this area of my thought, but I think it's still worth worrying about these things so our worst imaginations of the future don't come true. Let's start addressing these things that we think are minor issues now. Yeah, there's a grammar error here, there's a clinical tone fall in there, but the article's still good. The story is good, it's compelling, and when we started dropping these tiny bits of standard, it's like we're giving a hole for entropy to come through and start tearing apart the entire standard.
Yeah, and I wouldn't actually even go so far as to call it conspiracy theorist. I think it was just more alarmism, because it's very, very easy for especially a large demographic of people to sort of be anesthetized to these standards, and it's very easy to lose sight of them and move on from them without even understanding that you've done that. So, I think it is concerning, like you say. But I think the more important thing to recognize is that it's not really going away. It's just becoming more decentralized. For example, RPC, once again, I don't know if this is because I'm reading contest entries, which, obviously have a little more degree of competition behind them than just an average article. So I don't know if it's that I was reading RPC articles that are in a contest and I was reading SCP articles that weren't. But the difference in quality between the SCP and the RPC was tremendous. It was alarming, actually. And, I think that part of that, if only, is due to the lower amount of influx of mediocrity, quite honestly, coming into the RPC. And I think you get to spend a little more time. It's a little more one-on-one in the RPC than it is with the SCP. The trade-off you make at the SCP is you have more potential audience, but at the same time, you're thrown into a greater sea of faces that may not care to recognize you. So, certainly has benefits, but I think slowly RPC is rising to the level of what SCP standards used to be. And if you ask me, I think they're already there.
I don't think it's quite there yet because there is a lot of inconsistency in articles. Like a friend of mine, Jimmy Boy Haha, put it very well that RPC articles, when they're good, they're very good, but when they're bad, good God, they're bad.
Yeah.
And this is true until today. You could look at a fairly recent article and still find it's terrible. But seeing that the standards of RPC and SCP actually aren't as far as one would expect them to be is it feels kind of depressing, actually. Like, when I started dating back in the day that RPC was better than SCP, I didn't fucking mean it. I didn't think it would be ever true, and seeing myself slowly come right in that degree that RPC is getting better articles than SCP doesn't feel rewarding at all. It's actually just sad.
Yeah, it is. You can't get any joy from telling people that you told them so. You can't. There's no joy in that. I think you're right. I think that at RPC, the quality of the best articles is just as good as the quality of really, really good articles on the SCP. I think obviously just by sheer scale, there is a larger concentration of talented authors at the SCP, but once again, that's just playing numbers. I do think that there are a larger number of absolutely forgettable entries and authors at the SCP, and I think ultimately that's what's bringing it down. That's really going to take up a larger and larger portion of its mass, and at some point it's going to sag to the point. For example, like this week, I couldn't. The two articles that I recommended that I read were fantastic articles. It's hard to get better, in my opinion, but it still wasn't worth it. It just wasn't worth the slog of getting through. So, different strokes for different folks. Maybe the proper analogy is being in a metropolis as opposed to being somewhere a little more rural. But I think the bottom line is it's important to have a multitude of styles and places for us to get into and potentially write. And kudos to anybody at the RPC and these smaller, lesser known communities, because I think there's something to be said for stripping away some of the more degenerative and distractive qualities of writing in today's social media environment, and stripping those things away and asking yourself, do I still want to write? All right, and then James Bond says we should have a page for limfic on Containment Fiction Wiki, and I totally agree with that. I'm surprised that we haven't started that yet. Yes, absolutely. So I'll push that to Harmony. We'll get that going for sure. And speaking of which, here's an interesting thread on Twitter that we found from a little over a week ago. This is an individual saying, I wish the backrooms didn't have a silly monster. The locations are spooky enough as it is. things don't need a monster to be spooky. Sometimes a hallway is a monster, and that is okay. And this got a lot of attention around this with a lot of responses. And I thought this was interesting because of the past few weeks we've been talking about backrooms. Of course, that tweet from Quantum saying that the whole idea wasn't really that fertile creatively. But this was an interesting thread to get through. I'll just share that in the lounge here. James Bond says, Mr. Ferrante started another Limfic wiki. What is this? Timeless Pieces? Is that what this is called?
Places.
Timeless Places. My bad. Let's pop that up on the screen for a second. Give it a little bit of love. If it'll load. And this is why I don't do things live on my browser. No bueno. This is the worst. This is the worst produced podcast ever. All right, this looks pretty cool, by the way. My computer's not loading, but this is nice. Timeless Places, Sleep Tight. We'll take a look at this. Who is Mr. Ferrante? Do we know?
He's a YouTuber that he used to be the most popular one that to cover backrooms sort of content. Slowly, he kind of dropped off, and then he left the original backrooms, affected to Liminal Archives, and had a kind of renaissance period recently, and he just stopped and he's doing this now. I'm not sure why that happened at all, but he's doing this now.
This is interesting. So I just went to a random article. +9, so I mean we got good engagement for a relatively young wiki, it would seem, and I quite like the CSS theme. They got some nice little gimmicks going on here with the links. But yeah, okay. Well, thanks for sharing this. I'll tuck that away. Let's put that in the resources channel just in case someone hasn't seen that. That's pretty cool. Okay, moving on. Speaking of Twitter, so this is something interesting that happened. No one's quite sure about the details. Rumors are swirling. But Lord Bung, who we may know from a successful YouTube series, basically a cartoon going through various SCPs, has deleted their Twitter account as of this week. And this is, obviously, this was someone who is quite followed. There's a lot of rumors swirling around, none of which, of course, we can definitively comment on. But we certainly hope that Lord Bung is doing okay, and will return at least to the creative content that we know them for.
Jesus Christ, everyone is fucking quitting lately.
Yeah, actually, that's a great segue. Let's go ahead and get into the rest. So this is someone else who left this week, and this is a user by the name of Steph Lynch, who you may know. I think that most people who've been around the wiki know this individual very well. As you can see on the Wikidot profile, been around since December 2013, and for some reason, we don't really have a source on this. We don't really have any details on this. Essentially, in the last few days, deleted everything they've ever put on the wiki. And if you're not familiar, this individual has been writing since, maybe 2016, 2017, has a plethora of very, very successful articles, some of which you can, actually all of which you can still see in this page on the wiki, which is the deletion tag page. All of these are in the process of being deleted. But another hat that Steph Lynch was very, very good at was art. And so you may remember these, but this is the Milk Jesus. Of course, we all remember Milk Jesus, 6425, SCP-6425, I think it was, and all that stuff, all that good fun. But yeah, so there was just a lot of really talented work by this individual.
Yeah, the GIFs in 6747, those were their work.
What about 6747?
The GIFs, the art in 6747 were their work. Steph made them. Also for, I think, 6820?
Mm-hmm.
Those were also theirs. And the fucking Jaeger article for the Pacific Rim canon.
Yeah. So I think we see some of that
It's on screen right now.
Yep. And then so this, also the individual who redid the Gate Guardian image, which obviously is vastly superior to what it was. And of course some schematics that I think are probably useful. Something like a Scranton reality anchor. So just a lot of varied talent in this.
Oh, the GIF in 835 too. 895. That's
Yeah.
the coffin.
Yeah,
That if
yeah.
it's on screen, it fucks up things.
Yeah, and this author, obviously, I don't think was around for the first of the wiki. Kind of snuck in a very early article, 895, but also 618, which has been filled. I think at this point, a few articles. If you look on the deletion page, attempted. You can see 3 attempts at SCP-618 here, and I think it's finally been filled successfully. I think the author who got that space is Plague PJP. I haven't read the article, but I did take a brief look at it. It looks to be sort of in the Series 1 style. It's very short, not a lot going on, so that I at least appreciate that part of it. Have yet to see if it's actually what I think of it, but
Of course, it's there. Of course, it's short.
yeah.
If it would have been longer, it would have not snatched the space.
Yeah, I
That's a
hope
lot.
so. I think that if these spaces reopen, it's the least you can do is to just give a nod. I think hopefully to the past styles there, just for continuity. But anyway, so if you go to the Twitter of this individual, something today basically that was released was interesting. Once again, we don't really have a lot of information as to why this individual left. The individual who reported this to us initially just by rumor and hearsay said something to the extent of, you guys know why I'm quitting, was kind of the gist of it. But then we see this tweet pop up 10 hours ago, and it says, that feeling when you burn down your house and 24 hours after the fact you're standing there staring at the wreckage and thinking to yourself, why did I even do that? That's me right now, oops. So hopefully this means that Steph Lynch will be back. This is a very, very talented asset for the SCP Wiki. Not a lot of information about why it was quit, so maybe that's just an indication that it was, more of a...
Why the fuck did they do that?
Why?
Why?
I don't know, but just to continue, that's the trend that we've seen. And in fact, we'll go ahead and mention this. This is new to 05 today. Lilyflower, who has been, a member for a very, very long time in staff quite a lot, and actually was elevated to the anti-harassment team in 2020 by Dr. Mann after Solus Singularity was sort of asked to step down in the midst of that sexual scandal, and more recently was promoted to captain of the licensing team and oversaw the removal of the SCP-173 image. And that was just a few months ago, really. So we have this message from Lilyflower, who I think most people in this Discord server, at least, probably has something to say about. But she says, so effective now, I'm retiring from staff. This is something I've been considering for months. I was reading the charter rewrite, which is just a rat's nest, and realized that I don't have the enthusiasm anymore. And later goes on to say, maybe I'll come back and write again sometime, but for now, probably not for a while. So, just sad to see in some ways another individual just be completely burnt out. And I have a little bit more sympathy than I usually would because, like I said, I tried to read every SCP this week, and by the end of it, I was dreading it. So I wanted to end myself, really. So I got out of there. So I totally sympathize with this. But on the whole, I think this is a good thing for the SCP Wiki, quite honestly. All right, and that's really, I guess, the roundup of people who are leaving. Hopefully, hopefully Steph Lynch will come back. And then if you hadn't seen before on that deletion page, there's something that we may have caught our eye with, which is called SCP Meow. Now, this is in somewhat of a context with what we've been speaking about in the last few weeks, that being SCP-PL Cot J, which, as you recall, is simply the image of a cat. And that was its own fiasco, I suppose. But it seems as though it's not quite done. So now we have the textual evolution of that article, to where now we have a little more going on here. There's somewhat of a semblance of the format, and of course most of the text here, in fact every bit of the text is Meow. So here it is on the screen, and there you go. There's the article. There's the J. Not sure if it made you laugh. Initially it didn't make people laugh, so this was it's actually been posted twice. The author of this posted this in quick succession of one another very quickly. And the first time it seems to have failed pretty badly at a negative 15 rating, with people not liking it very much. But if you go to the new pages, you see it's also there. with 21 comments. And clicking on that, we now have really the same article. These images were there previously on the other one, and now it's at plus 60. So, wow, what a difference. This is once again posted just about an hour apart from this one and this one. So, yeah, this has been changed in very small ways. In fact, if you want to go to a difference checker, we can see just an addition of 32 meows, really. Those being a collapsible here, and one final image with a redacted caption, which 4 letters, which I wonder what that is. So interesting. It just goes to show you, perhaps, maybe this is some commentary on just how tenuous the line between success and failure is on something as hard hitting and high standards as the SCP Wiki. But it seems as though the collapse.
We've always known for a while that cat articles are immune to criticism.
Yeah,
this has been long known.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's really a wonderful build in this direction. This really limitless capability in this direction, because the first article, for example, had a very cute picture of a cat, and obviously that gets an upvote, right? There's nothing there that you can't upvote, and so this article actually takes that and very, very cleverly sort of plays with that theme. It has multiple cats in the first image, and actually really ups the stakes, really pushes the boundary of this new direction, new genre, subgenre, or style, and has a second picture of a cat, and then a third where they're fighting. So we have some action, and then rounding it out with a fourth. So if you are the type to upvote a cute cat picture, this is the article for you.
Have to upvote 4 times.
Yeah, it's exceeded expectations by the first picture. I mean, the rest is just a standing ovation. So, but yeah, it is interesting to note that the difference between the first attempt and this one is really a collapsible that has just a few meows in it, and then of course I did think this was pretty clever. Where it's just kind of funny. Whatever. So. Yeah, take that for what it is, whether that means that there are more opportune times to post your article for success, whether it's getting the right individuals to take a look at it initially out of the gate, or something as mild as just pushing the joke one step further, adding something like something interactive like a collapsible or another image. Who knows? But that is something I thought was very interesting to look at.
What's very funny is that RPC has done this before. This is one of the few times that I can actually say this non-ironically. I sent a link.
Oh, wow.
It's more or less the same gimmick, but with tables, and it's higher effort, as you can see.
Yeah, it is. Look at all the work that went into this. You got hyphenations, you got a banner.
Collapsibles are so I like it.
Where do these links go to? Oh, they actually go to different articles.
Actual pages.
That's pretty funny. Yeah. Wow. This is a lot of effort in here. Who wrote this? Let me guess. Table. No. High Gamma.
High Gamma,
Okay.
which is table.
Which is table. Okay, I figured. Yeah. So this was in 2020, March of 2020. Actually, probably a little earlier than that. Yeah. No, March of 2020. So yeah. No. Good parallel. This is. I would say I'd have to downvote this one because while it's impressive and while sure it's the front runner for this sort of joke, in another world, another person, maybe someone would say that the joke on the SCP, the Meow J, has already been done because of this. But don't think I could bring myself to upvote just because it's a nice picture. There's only one. It's a nice picture, but it's not really like cute, It doesn't really have like a cute fact. I love this. Look, it's like a barely visible JPEG of table, and then you got Zalgo text.
It's kind of hard to make tables as cute as cats.
Yeah. I mean, you got to work with the best ingredients. So we saw a cat, we saw a seal. A seal was next with the great seal. So. I'm very excited. I'll take a peek at the SCP Wiki. I think RPC has some ways to catch up. I mean, they're kind of getting the picture, no pun, but yeah, they need to probably go in the direction of cuter things, I would think, to really get to the levels of SCP.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
We should talk about dogs next time.
Yeah, we'll see.
Dog day.
That's pushing the envelope a little too much right now, I think. But we'll small steps. Maybe we'll get there. Okay, so then finally, just to round things out today, we'll save the most tedious for last, which is political commentary, which we look at the O5 for that and see what's up. Not a whole lot is actually going on. It's kind of a sleepy time for the O5. And part of that is because they've put them in front of themselves such a giant meal that it's really impossible to take even a small bite of. And that is the entire rewrite of the charter and all of their policy. And if once again, there will never be a podcast where I don't mention the Cerastes incident, probably until they settle this amongst themselves. But it once again is interesting to see that the whole motive for the charter rewrite was that they ran into a snag. They couldn't figure out how to discipline Dexanote, who is the head of discipline and who is an administrator. And so there's been a lot of talk as to the policy details and the policy in and outs of how that would logistically work. And that has inspired them to basically revamp the entirety of their charter and of their policy.
Yeah, when you get to this point, this fucking stupid point where you have to rewrite the entire rules of the site to discipline one of your top figures, you fucked up along the way. Something went wrong somewhere.
Right, we took a wrong turn, and we're actually, in my opinion, still taking a wrong turn. So you can debate what direction to go in. You can debate turns in the completely wrong direction, but it's not going to do you any good. The gist being that this whole thing was inspired by an incident where someone abused their position. They were essentially completely dismissive of whatever policies and charters were in play already. And so it doesn't make a lot of sense to rewrite something that was essentially ignored, essentially shat upon to begin with. So there's no reason to believe that even if you rewrite something like this very thoroughly and it's 100 times better, it's infinitely better than it was previously, that really doesn't address the issue of someone who's willing to step outside of those rules and beyond the boundaries that you set in order to, in this case, discipline someone or attempt to discipline someone who did not deserve it.
Yeah, I see no way this kind of discussion doesn't just end up with not only everyone being burned down, like burned out, but turn into fucking particulate matter.
Yeah,
At the end of this, you don't exist anymore. You're a zombie.
Yeah.
I've been lobotomized.
Yes,
I've
exactly.
been in shorter discussions than this. It lasted a single day, and I've come out completely dead in the eyes, and I have needed to drink coffee, take a bath, and take a few days off. That was just one day. I can't imagine how long and how grueling this process has to be, because this is not just something that is happening in the O5. It's happening in private discords, it's happening in staff chats, and it's going to keep happening and happening and happening because they can't just drop this. Now that it's there, it can't be dropped.
And it's really self-imposed because I think a lot of what the discontent comes from is the fact that Dexanote, is not being punished. And this is once again about over a year and a half out from his own admission that this needs to happen. And I wanted to bring this up just because this is a very interesting comparison point. So if you look back in August 2021 when Dr. Bright was finally banned, he was actually just given a 6-month ban, which of course is up by now. And you might be correct or intuitive to ask why he hasn't returned, given that his ban is up. But if you actually read why Dr.
Doesn't give a shit.
Yeah, probably not. But I think there's something else that he's afraid of coming back to in addition. But he is probably pretty comfortable there on TikTok with his adolescent audience. But anyways, so if you look at Admin Bright, who, if you don't know, the name suggests clearly enough that he was an administrator, Admin Bright has been given a 6-month ban for suggesting action against a user based off misinformation without properly fact-checking during a serious case, which resulted in erroneous judgment until corrected later. And so you would be excused for thinking they're talking about the Cerastes incident because that is exactly what happened with Dr. Magnus and Dexanote. And yet, the only thing potentially that Dexanote has been looking down the barrel of course the trigger has not been pulled, of course that's what we've been speaking of, was a slap on the wrist censure, which outside of the social dynamics of the O5 is really just a slap on the wrist. So it's just amazing to see the differential treatment here, and also the reminder that it's quite easy to discipline an administrator. And Dr. Bright, for example, was head of the anti-harassment team itself for quite some time. So just a lot of strange things going on, and this is a giant distraction.
It's quite astounding the amount of red flags that because Exonaut has threatened to do disciplinary action out of their own free will because they can technically ignore the rules and have said that they could do that, but they will not. For some reason, like the only reason you would say that is to threaten the people that are talking to you.
Yeah, and actually, it's funny.
That's a red flag for someone who leads the entire disciplinary process. That person is ripe to abuse their power and should be like hunted out of a role immediately. Like, do the fucking turtle later. Kick them out.
Yeah. And actually, what's really funny is that this very thing was voted on to avoid it. So in November, there was a thread that I think AIS Mallard put up on O5 that was basically saying, hey, staff, would y'all like to excuse and bypass all of this red tape? Of course, that is an infinitude of busy work that is going to be just a perpetual impediment to actually getting any disciplinary action seen or done. Once again, it being very mild, a censure compared to even what Dr. Bright had, a 6-month ban, which was too light as it is. And so there was a unanimous vote to bypass all of the bureaucratic impediments to just getting the discipline over with. And that was, once again, a unanimous vote. And the purpose of the vote was so that something like this didn't have to happen before discipline could be seen. And so once again, this is the way I put it is that the staff is essentially pissing on the leg of the user base and telling them that it's raining. And they've been doing this for about a year and a half, and it's just astounding to see. I mean, the only conclusion you can draw is that they have completely different standards for themselves, and they don't truly want to see anybody disciplined.
I really have to inform. I agree with that.
Yeah, it's bad. And then to make matters worse, Dexanote was recused from the disciplinary process, from the disciplinary proceedings of his own case, quite obviously, and then yet, in the need for rewriting the entirety of the charter, once again that being an artificial impediment, self-imposed, Dexanote was given a role on the committee to rewrite his own terms of disciplinary treatment. So it's very strange. It just doesn't make any sense at all. And so this is the third, maybe the third or the fourth O5 thread that is about the charter. And this is probably in the past week or so, 8 days. And they have not yet moved past the point of asking what a charter is, what it should go into. And if you look at the actual O4 mirror, which is the site, you can see that no one is interested in discussing this. We've seen main site mirrors of O5 threads, which are called O4s, several times, a lot of engagement from the community. And yet, this is once again the third thread on this issue, and if you go back, no one has said anything about any of these in the actual site. So it once again brings to mind that basically this is by staff, for staff. There in no way can be said to be a beneficial thing for the entirety of the wiki. The staff have by now completely abscessed them in their own world, where nothing outside of it is informing.
This is just too many fucking cooks, because you have too many people on the staff. All of them have a hand, and all of them have opposing opinions and opposing factions, and there's Dexanote having a hand in this, and there's so much like conflicting elements and so many cooks in the kitchen, and this meal is never going to be finished. The only way projects of this kind of scale ever get passed is if you take a small group of people, have a vision, have a more or less common vision, and just run through with it, and maybe run it for feedback and see what to change, and just live with the 3 or 4 people that will disagree, and just, because otherwise it's not going to get done. And you don't ask people for their opinions at this stage, because at that point it becomes a slog of bureaucracy.
Yeah, and that's what we're seeing. So if you look at this, so there was like 3 discussions about overhauling everything and having a memorandum on other policy changes while this is happening. Of course, that has not been enacted. There have still been other policy recommendations. But if you include those, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 posts about them already. And so this is just another project foundation that is never, ever going to get completed and is just going to be perpetually delayed. And once again, and this is a self-imposed, I don't think it's entirely engineered. I think they actually believe they're doing something good. But that's its own problem, you see. That's really sort of a clinical observation of how gone their ability to gauge what's good for the site really is.
Yeah, I think I have to agree. When you get to the point where you have to go through this fucking circus to do anything for the site, it's too far gone. Just start over, and this time do it with a direction and without asking that many people.
Yeah, and that's exactly what's happened in these threads that have attempted to make progress. Is that it's basically just become a shouting match, where you can't even take anything away from it. It's just completely mind-addling, and as you said, very, very mind-numbing to even read, and much less be a part of. So there's not much to say. We've already said everything that can be said about it. It's just more of the same. And I'm just I'm quite shocked, really, that this is being allowed. Not many people are paying attention, I think. Randerhouse is really the only on the staff who likes to bring this up, regularly. But like I said last time, even then he's sort of just politely knocking on the door and asking if they're ready to go out yet. And of course the answer is no. But anyways, so I think it's pretty dangerous. They're playing with fire because this is what the user base was looking at back in the town halls. It doesn't seem like they've learned their lesson, which, no surprise, they haven't upheld any of the promises during that time either. So we'll see. And then if anyone from the O5 is actually watching, ex post facto, your timer thing is busted. HellenBot seems to have been down for multiple weeks. I used to go to the timers to see what's being deleted so that I can scoop up any articles for the magazine that I think deserve a little better treatment, like, for example, what we posted this week. So I can't do that anymore. The timers don't work. But thank goodness that we have other things like the end deletion page that I can just use. Maybe I'll extend an image to Meow.j, a publication to Meow.j, the first version. See how that goes. But anyway, speaking of which, keep an eye out for publications in the next few weeks. Almarduk, I'm looking forward to yours as well. By this point, yours and Salt Blossoms as well. So,
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you all very, very much for joining. I want to thank Jane Bond, Almarduk, Dr. Fern, That Owl Dude. Thanks for showing up. Always a crazy week in containment fiction. I have no clue what we're going to talk about next week, but I'm sure there will be plenty of it. So check this out. Feel free to join. We got a Discord. You can call a number on the screen if you'd like to dial in. You can also call when we're not live to leave a voicemail. We're happy to listen to that as we did today. And check these out. Podcast, Confic Call-In. You can get to that from our website, www.Confic Magazine. And also we're on Twitch as SCP Meta. All right. Y'all, any closing thoughts, questions, comments, other topics?
This was fun. Wolf has gone way too far.
Thank you, That Owl Dude. Almarduk, what did you say? Something has gone too far?
These April Fools has gone too far. April Fools.
Oh, April Fool. Yeah, we're still.
Ripple up that all the time.
Yeah, the ripples have ripples, and we're still getting rocked back and forth with that. But we'll see. Who's going to leave next?
It's gone for too long. It's not funny anymore.
No, it's not funny. I don't know if it was funny to begin with. All right, so who's going to jump ship next? We don't know, but we'll be there to talk about it. Appreciate y'all. Always love having a sit down with y'all and talk about y'all are nerds like I am about this. No one else can talk about this stuff, so really appreciate it. And thanks for joining. And I hope to catch you next time. Y'all have a great week. Thanks.
Yeah.